Hey, good Monday morning, everybody. BM Weather Meteorologist Brett Waltz here, giving you a long-range forecast update, guys. Going to take a look at the pattern as we get into the middle part of June because some potential changes beginning to show up, what could develop for the latter part of this month. We'll also have an updated look at some analogs as we go throughout the summer, kind of working off of what we talked about last week in terms of key pattern drivers that are influencing the pattern right now. So getting into a little bit more detail on that. I wanted to start out just with the current radar this morning. Overall, quiet across the eastern half of the country. Some rains up in the northern plains, but it's pretty quiet as we start out this week. That will change, however, as we get into this afternoon and into this evening. A severe weather threat will begin to ramp up across western parts of the plains. A slight risk, that's a 2 on a scale of 5. As we work into tomorrow, this risk will shift further off to the east from northern parts of Texas and into northern parts of Illinois, and then a marginal risk we'll need to watch for the Ohio Valley as we work into your Wednesday. So we have storm chances ahead. We've got rain chances as well. If we take a look at the rainfall forecast the next 7 days, very active, guys, across much of the middle of the country. I mean, we're talking about some additional heavy rain, 3 inches plus down in parts of Oklahoma, 2 inches plus across western parts of Missouri, eastern Kansas. Wouldn't be shocked data, a little bit too aggressive in parts of Nebraska and Iowa, but still looking to cash in on some widespread heavier moisture in there. Really the only areas in the ag belt missing out the next 7 days will be parts of the northern plains. And if we take a look at the last 7 days of observed rainfall, again, all this found on our Clarity platform, these areas in the northern plains were some of the areas that got skipped out the past 7 days. It hasn't been bone dry anywhere, but all things considered, the last 7 days drier than normal across the upper Midwest, the Great Lakes, and the northern plains, with the heavier rains the past 7 days further down to the south. Again, we should fill this in quite a bit as we go over the next 7 days. And a lot of that's because of the temperature pattern that's setting up. You take a look at the next 7 days, we've got cooler air in the middle of the country, warmer air on the west coast and on the east coast. Naturally, in between, you tend to get very active, and you can see that there with the week 1 precipitation forecast. We go into the week 2 time frame, we'll start cooler. There are some signals that down the road, we'll talk more about this in a moment as well, some signals down the road that the northern tier of the U.S. could start to warm up in a little bit more of a notable fashion. Extreme, no, not suggesting that, but above normal temperatures a little bit more consistently, perhaps by the midway point of June. In terms of precipitation, the western half of the country drier than normal. I think that the southern tier, southeastern tier of the U.S. continues to be active, not dry across the central plains and the Ohio Valley, but not as active as areas across the upper Midwest and the southeastern part of the country. If we take a look, just kind of the pattern evolution day by day here over the next couple of weeks, guys, you can see a little bit of a warm up here in the short term across the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, but it's just not sustained. We have not been able to get sustained warmth, and I don't see that ahead. You take a look, cooler air gets trapped in the central plains and into the Midwest, and really that lingers as we go throughout this week and into early next week. Another shot of some cooler air in here. We go into early next week, and then here's what I'm talking about in terms of maybe the pattern warming up a little bit. 12th, 13th, 14th of the month, you can see data trying to indicate some more widespread above normal temperatures. We do have some support for that as we get into the extended range. So I do think that that is a trend that we need to monitor pretty carefully. If we take a look at our tropical forcing and the potential reasoning for that, we're working through MJO phases 6 and 7 in the short term. That's the reason that we're a little bit cooler. Phase 6 is the reason that we're very active the next several days. But then we should be working into MJO phases 8. And I believe phase 1. I think that data may be a little bit too weak here trying to kill this off. I think that we feel MJO phases 8 and 1, late week 2 and into the week 3 time frame. And if we look at what that would mean, well, phase 8 here, you're still not super warm. You're a little bit warmer to the north, cooler down to the south and to the east, but we start to build in more widespread warmer risk in here as we get into phase 1. And if we rolled this forward 1 month to JJA instead of MJJ, May, June, July, phase 1's an even warmer phase. So I would argue that this could even be a little bit too cool. And so this would indicate that by the end of week 2 and probably more so into week 3, the pattern could start to warm up. What does it mean in terms of precipitation? Well, we're kind of seeing in the 6 to 10 day time frame, once we get past the activity in the short term, we could dry out a little bit, but not notably, because you work into phase 8, you start to pick up some more precipitation chances. And I think more notably, as we get into phase 1, what can start to happen for the middle to latter part of the month, northern plains starts to get a little bit more active, upper Midwest, we start to pick up some northwest flow potential. So that would be a different type of pattern than what we're dealing with right now. We're not really dealing with true storm clusters right now in that type of pattern. We're dealing with more storm systems from the gradient and temperatures. But again, you take a look at the upper level pattern here by the midway point of the month. This is traditionally a look that's going to favor some kind of storm cluster threat around the top of this ridge into this region in here. Now, could that lead to some drier risk, lower Ohio Valley, Central Plains? I don't think it's completely off the table. I still think the southeast is probably active because you have the conflicting and the clashing winds in here. It's probably going to continue to be active on the Gulf Coast, but it would not shock me to set up a pattern for the middle to latter part of the month that's a little bit more active north, more active on the Gulf Coast, could start to dry things out in between. You can see the EPS trying to start to hint at that idea. I don't think we're quite there yet. We're certainly not dry yet. Still normal to above normal precipitation for the entirety of the ag belt. And so, the next 15 days, really no notable red flags. It's not going to be consistently warm. It's not going to be consistently dry. I think that by the end of this period, could we start to warm up? Could we start to dry out a little bit? Possibly, but at least for the time being, nothing too concerning in the cards. To expand a little bit on the mid-June pattern idea, we're also kind of starting to see this signal here with our global wind state weakening a little bit. That would also tend to favor some of the warmer risk redeveloping for the latter part of the month. Specifically, we're in what we call GWO, or the Global Wind Oscillation, phases 8 and 1, which just means that it's starting to drop. And if you look at what that typically favors for June, favors a warm-up. It's pretty widespread warmth for the United States. And so again, last 15 to maybe 10 days of the month, give or take a couple of days, pattern could start to become a little bit warmer than normal. And if we look at the latest EPS weekly, it sees it. It's very close to this analog in here. I think that after the 14th or 15th of the month especially, we start to see more warmth, and perhaps by the end of June, maybe at times heat waves in this region in here. So that is something to keep in mind. In terms of the pattern setup, as we get into the week 3 time frame out through the 21st, 22nd of the month, we'd be watching this area, upper Midwest, Great Lakes, for storm cluster risk, potentially severe storm cluster risk. What does that mean if you're further south into the west? Messier precipitation, beginning to get a little bit hotter, beginning to get a little bit drier. Kansas, Nebraska, maybe Missouri, as we get through this time frame. You take a look at the CFS, just as a general idea, not taking it verbatim. This is its supercell composite parameter, so giving you an idea of where those storm clusters could form. Again, it's favoring the pattern in terms of severe weather to get more active up there. And the EPS is seeing it as well. You can see here, starting to bring in more moisture in this region. It's even a little bit further to the north. Still keeps in rains to the south, trying to get a little bit drier, central and the southwest plains. And so we've got multiple different pattern drivers here suggesting that, the first 15 days of the month, no concerns. Not super warm. It's active, plenty of moisture in here. Late June, getting hotter. Perhaps parts of the central plains getting drier with storm cluster and severe weather activity, northern plains, upper Midwest, and the northern Ohio Valley. And that's kind of where we are at right now. We'll dive into this in a little bit more detail in our weeks 3 and 4 update tomorrow. I did want to real quick before we go expand a little bit on the Atlantic Ocean, which I think is a big reason why the drought signal has become a little bit less extreme going into summer. We updated our outlooks last week if you watched our videos. Generally, it still favors warmth, maybe more situated in the Pacific Northwest and the Canadian prairies, but the drier signal on these analogs, just not as dry. It does favor some dryness still, and I still think there is the potential, especially this area in here, that it can get dry at times. But I think that there's timely rains, especially the further east that you are. The Ohio Valley still looking active, upper Midwest, Great Lakes maybe a little bit more active. It's just not as extreme of a signal. Can there be drought conditions expanding middle part of summer? I think that's still when it could get hot and dry. It's not impossible, but it just may be more difficult to get consistent extreme heat and lack of moisture based off how things stand right now. Guys, that's all I have for today's forecast. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. We'll be monitoring that potential pattern transition very carefully for the latter third of June over the coming days.